My little brother woke me at 2 a.m. holding a bloody knife and said we had to run. I finally understand what he saw. I'm 28F and my little brother is Tyler. He's 24. We have always been close growing up. He's my only sibling. Our parents died in a car accident when Tyler was 18 and I was 22, so we've only had each other since then. 2 months ago Tyler woke me up at 2 a.m. He was standing at the foot of my bed holding a kitchen knife. The blade was covered in blood. There was blood on his shirt. There was blood on his hands. My first thought was that he'd hurt himself. My second thought was that he'd hurt someone else. I jumped out of bed and asked what happened. He was shaking. His eyes looked wild, unfocused, like he wasn't really seeing me. He said, "We have to run. We have to leave right now. Pack a bag. Don't ask questions, dash." I said, "Tyler, what did you do? What happened, dash?" He said, "There are people coming, bad people. We need to go now, dash." I tried to get more information, but he was in some kind of state, panicked, manic, almost. He kept saying we needed to leave, kept saying they were coming, kept saying I wouldn't understand if I didn't see what he saw. I told him to sit down and take deep breaths, told him we had to call the police if something had happened, if someone needed help, the police needed to know. Tyler stared at me like I'd suggested jumping off a bridge. He said, "The police are part of it. We can't call them, dash." Part of what I asked him, part of what, Tyler? But he wouldn't answer. He just kept saying that we needed to run. The knife was shaking in his hand. I could see the blood dripping onto my carpet. My brain was trying to process what I was seeing, but nothing made sense. This was Tyler, my little brother, who cried when we had to put our childhood dog down. Tyler, who volunteered at the animal shelter every weekend. Tyler, who couldn't even kill spiders in his apartment. I said, "Tyler, please, you're scaring me. Put the knife down, dash." He stared at the knife like he'd forgotten. He was holding it. His face went pale. He dropped it to the floor and started backing away from it like it might bite him. "I didn't mean to, dash," he said. "I didn't mean to hurt it, but I had to get away. I had to get out of there, dash." "Out of where, dash?" I asked. "The shelter, dash," he said. "I was at the shelter and I saw him. I saw what he was doing, dash." Who was doing, dash? Tyler began to cry, really cry, tears streaming down his face. He said, "You won't believe me. No one's going to believe me, dash." I managed to take the knife from the floor and put it in my bathroom sink. I got Tyler to sit down on my bed. I sat next to him and put my arm around him. He was trembling. I said, "Tyler, I need you to tell me what happened from the beginning, dash." He took a shaky breath. He said, "I was doing my volunteer shift at the shelter. It was late, around midnight. Most of the staff had gone home. It was just me and Marcus doing the night feeding, dash." Marcus was another volunteer. I'd met him a few times. Nice guy, quiet. Tyler continued, "Marcus left around 12-30, said he had to be up early, so it was just me. I was finishing up with the dogs when I heard a noise from the back storage room, like something falling over, dash." "Okay, dash," I said. I went to check it out. The door was open. It's usually locked after hours, and I saw someone in there, a man I didn't recognize. He was going through the medical supplies, taking things, sedatives, syringes, dash. "Did you confront him, dash?" "No, I hid. There was something about him that didn't feel right, really wrong," he muttered to himself. "Subjects and test groups and time windows." He had this folder with him, papers sticking out of it, and I saw something on one of the papers. "What did you see, dash?" Tyler looked at me, his eyes bloodshot. He said, "A list of names, and one of them was Sarah Winters, dash." "The name meant nothing to me," I said. "Who's Sarah Winters, dash?" "She went missing 3 years ago. I remember because she worked at the coffee shop I used to go to every morning. One day she was there, the next day she wasn't. They said she'd probably left town, that she'd been unhappy with her life and just took off, but here was her name on this guy's list, dash." I felt a chill run down my spine. I said, "What did you do, dash?" I tried to take a picture of the paper, but my phone flash went off. The guy heard it. He turned around and saw me and the look on his face. Tyler shuddered. He smiled at me, this horrible smile, and he said, "You should have minded your own business, dash." He came at me. I ran, grabbed the first thing I could find, which was a box cutter from the supply shelf. He chased me through the shelter. I ended up in the kennels and one of the dogs got loose. A big German shepherd named Rex. Rex went after the guy, started barking and snapping at him, dash. The guy pulled something out of his pocket. I thought it was a weapon. I panicked. I threw the box cutter at him. It hit Rex instead, cut his leg, not deep but enough to make him bleed. The guy used that moment to run. He got out through the back door and I was left standing there with Rex bleeding and my hands covered in his blood from trying to stop it, dash. I bandaged Rex up as best I could, but I was freaking out because I realized this guy might come back, might come after me, might have friends, and I knew no one would believe me if I said some stranger at the shelter had a list of missing people. It sounded crazy even to me, dash. That's when I came here. I grabbed one of the knives from the shelter kitchen. I wasn't thinking straight. I just knew I needed to warn you, needed to get us somewhere safe, dash. I sat there processing this. It sounded insane, but Tyler wasn't a liar. He wasn't prone to making things up, and he was genuinely terrified. I said, "Tyler, we need to call the police. If what you're saying is true, they need to know, dash." He grabbed my arm hard. He said the police were part of it. He said it right before he ran. He said, "We have people everywhere. Even the cops won't help you, dash." I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to do, so I did the only thing that made sense to me at the time. I called 911. When the police arrived, they were skeptical from the start. They saw Tyler covered in blood. They saw the knife. They asked what had happened and Tyler tried to explain, but it came out jumbled, confused. He mentioned the man and the list and Sarah Winters, and they exchanged looks, the kind of looks that said they thought Tyler was having some kind of episode. One of the officers went to the shelter to check things out. He came back an hour later and said there was no evidence of a break-in, no evidence anyone had been in the storage room. The medical supplies were all accounted for. The only thing out of place was Rex, who had a bandaged leg and was fine otherwise. The officer said, "Your brother injured a dog. The shelter director wants to press charges unless he agrees to a psychiatric evaluation." Tyler began to protest, began to say there was a man there, began to get agitated. The officers exchanged more looks. They took Tyler to the hospital. I followed in my car. They admitted him for a 72-hour psychiatric hold. I sat in the waiting room feeling numb, feeling like I'd made a terrible mistake, but what else could I have done? Update: 2 weeks later. Tyler was discharged. After 3 days, the doctors diagnosed him with acute stress disorder and possible early signs of a psychotic break. They put him on medication, antipsychotics, and anti-anxiety pills. They set him up with a therapist, Dr. Hannah Chin, twice weekly. Tyler came to stay with me. He didn't want to be alone in his apartment. I didn't want him to be alone either, but having him there was hard. He became obsessive about security. He would check every lock in my apartment several times a day. He insisted we keep the curtains closed at all times. He didn't want to go outside. Whenever I asked him to go for a walk or to have coffee, he'd shake his head and say it wasn't safe. He wouldn't sleep at night. I would hear him pacing in the guest room, mumbling to himself, and sometimes wake up to find him standing by the window, peeking through the curtains, watching the street below. I asked him what he was looking for. He said, "They're watching. I know they're watching." Who's watching? Tyler. The people from the shelter, the people on that list. They know I saw, they know I know. I tried to be patient. I tried to be understanding. The doctors said that this was normal for someone going through what Tyler was going through, that eventually the paranoia would fade with medication and time, that I needed to be supportive but firm, not feed into his delusions. But it was hard because part of me wondered if maybe there was something to what he was saying, if maybe he really had seen something that night at the shelter. 2 weeks into his stay, I got a call from Dr. Chin. She asked if she could speak with me about Tyler's progress. I said yes. We met at her office, a small woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense air about her. She offered me tea. I declined. She said, "I'm concerned about Tyler. He's not responding to treatment the way I'd hoped." What do you mean? I asked. "He's obsessed with this incident at the shelter. He talks about it all the time, about the man he says he saw, about the list. He's created this whole story around it, and when I try to help him examine the evidence, he gets defensive." What evidence? Well, for starters, there's no evidence anyone else was at the shelter that night. The security footage shows only Tyler entering and leaving, no one else. The medical supplies he claims were being stolen were all accounted for. The shelter director confirmed this. I felt my stomach sink. "So you think he made it up?" "I think something traumatic happened to Tyler, maybe a flashback to your parents' death, maybe something else, and his mind created a narrative to explain the feelings he was having, the fear, the panic, the sense that something was wrong. It's not uncommon in cases of acute stress disorder." But he seemed so sure. I said. "I know, and that's what concerns me, because if he can't let go of this narrative, if he keeps adding to it, we might be looking at something more serious than stress disorder. We might be looking at paranoid delusional disorder." She leaned forward. She said, "Has he mentioned anything about conspiracies, about people being out to get him, about organizations or groups working against him?" I thought of Tyler's comments about the police being involved, about people watching. I nodded slowly. Dr. Chin sighed. She said, "That's what I was afraid of. I'm recommending he see a psychiatrist for a more thorough evaluation. I'm also recommending we increase his medication dosage if he's willing. And if he be not willing, then we might have to consider another involuntary hold. I don't want it to come to that, but if he's a danger to himself or others, we may not have a choice." I left the office defeated, feeling like I was failing Tyler, feeling like no matter what I did, I couldn't help him. When I got home, Tyler was waiting for me. He was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open. He had papers spread out everywhere, maps, printouts, notes. He said, "You talked to Dr. Chin." It wasn't a question. I said, "How did you know?" "Because you have that look on your face, the look that says you think I'm losing it." "Tyler, I don't think that." "Yes, you do. Everyone does. Dr. Chin does. The police do. Even you." His voice cracked. "But I'm not crazy. I know what I saw." I sat down across from him. I looked at the papers on the table, lists of names, dates, locations, and Google Maps screenshots with circles drawn on them. I said, "What is all this?" "Proof." Tyler said, "I've been doing research, looking into Sarah Winters, looking into other missing people in the area, and I found something." He slid a piece of paper across the table to me. It was a printout from a missing persons database. 14 names, 14 people who'd gone missing in our city over the past 5 years. No bodies found, no explanations, just gone. "Okay, I said slowly. "People go missing. It's tragic, but it happens. Look at where they live." Tyler said. He pulled up a map on his laptop, showed me 14 red pins scattered across the city. At first they looked random, but then Tyler drew a circle around them. They all fell within a 3-mile radius. "That could still be coincidence." I said. "Could be, but look at this." He pulled up another map. This one showed a building in the center of that 3-mile radius, an old warehouse or factory, abandoned looking. That building, it's in the middle of all of them, and it's owned by a company called Meridian Solutions. "What's Meridian Solutions?" I don't know, that's the problem, there's almost no information about them online, no website, no public records, just a name on the deed to that building dash. I looked at Tyler, really looked at him, he had dark circles under his eyes, he'd lost weight, his hands were shaking slightly but his eyes were clear, focused, not the eyes of someone losing touch with reality. I said, have you shown this to Dr. Chen? Yes, she said I was making connections that didn't exist, she said people see patterns where there aren't any, she wrote it all down in her notebook and then asked me how the medication was making me feel dash. Have you shown this to the police dash? Tyler laughed bitterly. I went to the station yesterday, showed them everything, they looked at me like I was a conspiracy theorist, they said the missing persons cases were unrelated, they said Meridian Solutions was a private company and there was nothing suspicious about them, they basically patted me on the head and sent me home dash. I stared at the maps, at the names, at the building in the center of it all. I said, what do you want me to do dash? Tyler looked at me with desperate hope in his eyes, he said, believe me, just believe me, everyone else thinks I'm crazy but you're my sister, you know me, you know I wouldn't make this up dash. I thought of Dr. Chen's warnings, the danger of feeding into delusions of how Tyler might be getting worse, not better. But I also recalled the fear in his eyes that night at 2 a.m., the real terror, the blood on his hands. I said, I believe that you believe this, and I believe you saw something that scared you, so let me help you, let me look into this properly, not the police, not Dr. Chen, me dash. Tyler nodded, a tear ran down his cheek, he said, thank you dash. Update 1 month later. Tyler left my apartment 2 days after our conversation. He packed a bag while I was at work and left a note saying he couldn't put me in danger, that he needed to figure this out on his own, that he'd be in touch when he had real proof. I called him immediately, the phone went straight to voicemail, I called again and again, nothing. I phoned Dr. Chen but she explained that she couldn't discuss Tyler's case with me without his permission. I filed a missing persons report, the police took the information but didn't appear too concerned, they said Tyler was an adult, that there was no evidence of foul play, that he'd likely come back when he was ready. I spent 3 weeks calling his phone daily, driving around the city looking for him, checking his apartment, asking his friends if they'd heard from him, nothing. I was going crazy with worry, all I could think about was what he'd said about the people watching, about them knowing that he knew. What if something had happened to him, what if he'd gone to that building and someone had caught him? Then he appeared at my door on day 23. He looked terrible, he'd lost at least 15 pounds, his clothes hung off him, his hair was greasy and unkempt, there was a wild look in his eyes but also something else, something determined. He was carrying a backpack stuffed with papers and a laptop in a worn case. I pulled him inside, I wanted to yell at him for scaring me, for disappearing, but the words died in my throat as I saw his face. He looked like he'd been through something that had changed him. He said, I need you to look at this, really look at it and tell me I'm not crazy dash. He dumped everything onto the kitchen table, papers spilled everywhere, photographs, maps covered in notations, newspaper clippings, printed emails, lists of names and dates and locations. I said, Tyler, where have you been dash? Working, investigating, following leads, I've been staying in cheap motels, paying cash, keeping off the grid dash. Why dash? Because I needed to know for sure, I needed proof that I wasn't making this up, that what I saw that night was real. He started organizing the papers, pointing things out to me rapid fire. Look here, these are the 14 missing persons. I cross-referenced them with social media, with public records, with everything I could find, and I found connections dash. He showed me printouts of Facebook posts, Instagram photos, LinkedIn profiles. 6 of them volunteered at animal shelters, 3 different shelters, but still 6 out of 14, that's not a coincidence dash. Tyler. Wait, listen, 4 of them were in the healthcare field, not as doctors or nurses mind you, but orderlies, medical assistants, lab technicians, people who would have access to medical equipment and supplies dash. Okay, but... And all 14 of them, every single one, they all disappeared after visiting the same coffee shop. I tracked their credit card records through public court documents from their disappearance cases. They all used their cards at a place called Daily Grind on the same day they vanished dash. I looked at the evidence, the connections that he was making, it seemed like a lot, but then again I remembered Dr. Chen's warnings about people seeing patterns that didn't exist. I said, Tyler, you know what Dr. Chen would say about this, right? She'd say you're cherry-picking data, finding connections, because you want them to be their dash. Tyler's face fell, he said, so you don't believe me either dash. I didn't say that, I need more, I need something concrete, something that can't be explained away as coincidence dash. Tyler reached into his backpack, he pulled out a manila folder, he opened it and slid 3 photographs across the table. They were surveillance photos, grainy, taken at night, showing the outside of the warehouse building, the Meridian Solutions building. The first showed a van parked out front, the second showed 2 men dressed in dark clothes unloading something from the van, something wrapped in a tarp. The third photo showed the men carrying whatever it was into the building. Tyler said, I took these 4 nights ago. I've been watching the building, people come and go, but only at night, always in unmarked vehicles, always carrying things in and out, and I saw something else dash. He pulled out another photo. This one showed a man's face. He was getting out of a car near the building. That's him dash. Tyler said, that's the man from the shelter, the one I saw going through the medical supplies dash. I stared at the photo. The man was maybe 50 years old, balding, wearing glasses. He looked completely ordinary. I said, are you sure dash? I'm positive I've seen his face every night in my nightmares. That's him dash. I didn't know what to think. The photos were compelling, but they could also be explained away. Maybe the building was being legitimately used for something. Maybe the man just happened to look like someone Tyler remembered. I said, what do you want to do with this? Take it to someone who will actually investigate, a journalist, someone who can look into this properly without dismissing me as delusional. I thought about it, then I remembered Rachel Desmond. We'd gone to high school together. She worked for Channel 7 News, now did investigative pieces. I said, I know someone, let me reach out to her. I contacted Rachel through the Channel 7 website, explained that I had information about possible missing persons cases, and asked if she'd be interested in looking into it. She emailed back within 2 hours. She said she would be very interested, and we set up a meeting for the next day. Rachel met us at a coffee shop. She was exactly how I remembered her: sharp, professional, intense. She'd always been the type to ask hard questions and not accept surface-level answers. Tyler showed her everything. He'd compiled the maps, the lists, the connections, the photos. She looked through it all carefully, taking notes, asking questions. When Tyler finished explaining, she sat back and crossed her arms. She said, this is either the work of someone experiencing a mental health crisis, or it's one heck of a story. I'm not crazy, Tyler said quietly. I didn't say you were. I said either or, and honestly, I'm leaning toward it being a story because I've been hearing things. What things? I asked. Rumors about Meridian Solutions, about the building. Nothing concrete, nothing I could publish, but enough to make me curious, and your information fills in some gaps. So you'll investigate? Tyler asked. I'll look into it. I can't promise anything, but I'll look into it. She did more than look into it. She plunged right in. Update: 6 weeks later. Rachel investigated for 6 weeks. She collaborated with police departments in 3 counties. She interviewed families of the missing persons. She dug into financial records. She examined the ownership structure of the Meridian Solutions building. What she found out was shocking. Meridian Solutions was a shell corporation set up to own that building and conduct business that couldn't be traced. No website, no public presence, no employees listed anywhere, just a series of LLC registrations leading to offshore accounts. Rachel found records that the building was being used for medical research, but not the legitimate kind, the kind that would never get approved by any ethics board or regulatory agency. She found purchase records for medical equipment, sedatives, restraints, monitoring devices, all purchased through third-party vendors paid for in cash. She interviewed a former employee, a man named Derek, who'd worked as a security guard at the facility for 3 months. Before quitting, he'd signed an NDA but was willing to break it. He told her that people were taken to the facility at night, kept in rooms in the basement, and that doctors conducted experiments on them. He didn't know what for, but he had heard screaming and saw people who looked sick and injured being taken in and out. He said he quit because he couldn't stomach it anymore. He tried to go to the police, but they dismissed him. Rachel took all of this to her news director. Her news director contacted the FBI. The FBI opened an investigation. When he heard the news, Tyler came out of hiding. He met with FBI agents and gave them everything. He had all his research, all his photos, everything. The FBI got warrants, raided the Meridian Solutions building at dawn on a Tuesday morning. What they found inside was worse than anyone had imagined. The basement of the building had been converted into a makeshift medical facility. There were 6 rooms. Each room had a hospital bed, medical equipment, monitoring devices. Inside they found 7 people. 7 of the 14 missing persons, the 7 were alive but in bad shape, malnourished, some injured, all showing signs of long-term psychological trauma. The FBI also found records, detailed records of experiments conducted on the people, held their tests of pain tolerance, studies on psychological breaking points, research into how much physical and mental stress a human being could endure. The doctor running the facility was a man named Dr. Aaron Marsh. He'd been a legitimate researcher once but had lost his medical license after ethics violations. He'd set up Meridian Solutions as a way to continue his research without oversight. The man Tyler had seen at the shelter was Kenneth Gray. He'd been recruiting test subjects, looking for people who wouldn't be missed, people without close family ties. He'd use the animal shelters as hunting grounds because volunteers there tended to be compassionate people who could be lured with stories about helping animals in need. The coffee shop was where he made the initial contact, where he'd drug their drinks with sedatives, where he'd wait for them to become disoriented before leading them to waiting vehicles to take them to the facility. Dr. Marsh and Kenneth Gray were arrested along with 4 other employees on the charges of kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, assault, and dozens more. The 7 survivors were treated in hospitals, given medical care and counseling, and their families were notified. Tyler was called to give a statement. He sat in an FBI office for 6 hours going through everything he'd seen, everything he'd discovered. When he came out, he looked very tired yet relieved, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He came to my apartment. I opened the door and he just stood there for a moment. Then he said, I wasn't crazy. No. I said, you weren't. We hugged, both of us cried, and then we sat on my couch and watched the news coverage of the raid. It is lethal to humans and animals in large doses. Final update: 3 months later. The case wrapped up 3 months after the raid. Dr. Marsh and Kenneth Gray went to trial. Both were convicted. Dr. Marsh got life in prison without parole. Kenneth Gray got 40 years. The other 4 employees pleaded out in exchange for lighter sentences. The 7 survivors are each at different stages in their recovery processes. Some are doing better than others. The FBI set them up with counseling and support services. Tyler did an interview with Rachel for her investigative piece. The story ran as a special report on Channel 7 and was picked up by national news outlets. Rachel's reporting won a regional journalism award. Tyler moved into his own apartment last month. He's still seeing a therapist but switched from Dr. Chen to someone he felt he could trust more. He's working with a victim advocacy group now, helping families of missing persons, using his experience to push for better investigation protocols. He gave a talk at a local community center last week about trusting your instincts when something feels wrong, about not dismissing people who come forward with concerns just because they seem paranoid or unstable. I went to the talk, sat in the back row, and watched him speak. He was confident, articulate, strong, nothing like the terrified, blood-covered man who'd stood at the foot of my bed months ago. After the talk, a woman came up to him. She was probably in her 60s. She had tears in her eyes. She said her daughter had been missing for 4 years, and the police had stopped looking. Tyler took her information and said he'd help her find answers. As we left, I asked Tyler how he was doing, really doing. He said, "I'm okay, better than okay actually. I feel like I have a purpose now, like what happened to me happened for a reason, so I could help other people. Do you still have nightmares? I asked. Sometimes, but they're getting less frequent, and when I wake up I remind myself that it's over, that the people responsible are in prison, that 7 people are alive because I didn't give up. We got in my car. Tyler looked out the window at the passing city. He said, "I've been thinking about Rex, the dog I heard at the shelter. I went to see him last week. He's been adopted by a nice family. He's doing well. The cut healed up fine. That's good. I said. Yeah, I was worried about him. We drove in silence for a while. Then Tyler said, "I got a call from one of the survivors yesterday. Her name is Miranda. She wanted to thank me, said she'd given up hope that anyone would find her. His voice cracked slightly. She said that on the night of the raid, about an hour before the FBI arrived, Kenneth Gray came down and told them someone had figured it out, that their time was running out. She said that last hour was the worst hour of her entire captivity. I pulled into a parking spot near his apartment, turned to look at him. I said, "Tyler, you saved her. You saved all of them. That last hour happened, but she survived it. They all survived. I know. He said, "I just wish I'd figured it out sooner. You figured it out when no one else did, when everyone told you that you were wrong. That takes courage. Tyler nodded, got out of the car and leaned back in through the window. He said, "Thanks for believing me eventually. I'm sorry it took me so long. I said, "You believed me when it mattered. That's what counts. He walked towards his building. I watched him go, watched him wave before disappearing inside. I drove home thinking about that night, about Tyler standing at the foot of my bed holding a bloody knife, about how close I came to dismissing everything he'd said as delusion, about how 7 people would still be in that building if he'd given up. Tyler saw something terrible and refused to let it go. He kept pushing when everyone told him to stop, when doctors medicated him and therapists questioned him and police dismissed him. He was right about all of it, about the man at the shelter, about the missing people, about the building, about the experiments. And because he didn't give up, because he kept fighting even when everyone thought he was losing his mind. 7 people came home. 7 families got their loved ones back. A criminal operation was shut down. That's what I finally understand. What Tyler saw that night wasn't just a man stealing medical supplies. It was the start of something big, a pattern, a truth that needed to come out. He saw it because he was paying attention, because he refused to accept the easy explanation, because he trusted himself even when no one else did. The FBI is still investigating, looking into whether there are other facilities, other victims, other operations connected to Meridian Solutions. Tyler's helping with that investigation, working with agents to identify patterns, to find connections, to save more people. He called yesterday to say they'd found another facility in the next county, found 3 more victims alive, and arrested 2 more people involved in the operation. He said, "It's not over, but we're winning." And he's right. Because of him, they're winning. People are being saved. Families are getting answers. Justice is being served, all because my little brother woke me up at 2 a.m. holding a bloody knife and refused to run.